She's Mary Poppins, y'all! Welcome to MsMojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 things you missed in Mary Poppins Returns. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're taking a look at Easter eggs, small details, and connections that might have eluded you in this long-awaited sequel. We'll keep any spoilers to a minimum, but we will be delving into a few plot points. Number 10. Mary's cheeky reflection.
Cheeky.
During the A Spoonful of Sugar musical number from the 1964 classic, Mary Poppins demonstrates that she's far from an ordinary nanny, cleaning a room in a literal snap and sharing a duet with her own reflection.
And hence, they find their task is not a grind.
When Mary reunites with the Banks children in the sequel, she's quick to check herself in the mirror. Although Mary is as proper as ever, her cheeky side once again shines through her reflection, which sends her identical counterpart a subtle glance.
It is wonderful to see you.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Just as Mary's reflection winks to her in the original, this moment serves as a figurative wink to the fans and the makers of the first film, establishing that this sequel will be a loving homage. Number 9. Nellie Rubina.
Which proves our cover is not the book, so open it up and take a look.
With assistance from Jack and an animated ensemble, Mary puts on a production number for Michael's children entitled A Cover Is Not the Book. The theme of the song is that both books and people aren't always what they seem on the surface, encouraging us to look inside. Likewise, if you take a closer look at the stories on display, readers of P.L. Travers' books will recognize the name Nellie Rubina. Although this character doesn't appear in Mary Poppins Returns, she did play a role in the second book, Mary Poppins Comes Back. Nellie also pops up in the third book, Mary Poppins Opens the Door, a title that has great significance in this film. Number 8. Lin-Manuel Miranda's Cockney accent.
As I live and breathe.
Bert is off seeing the world in the sequel, but his spirit lives on through Lamplighter Jack, played by Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton. Like Dick Van Dyke before him, Miranda brings the same energy, enthusiasm, and charisma to his role.
It's a good thing you come along when you did, Mary Poppins.
That being said, even Miranda admitted that his Cockney accent isn't exactly the most authentic.
Well, if they didn't like his, they're going to be furious with mine.
Considering that Van Dyke's accent in the original film is widely considered one of the most infamous in cinema though, you could argue that's the point.
Bert, it's you.
In the flesh and at your service.
As was the case with Van Dyke, the passion Miranda throws into his performance overshadows his obviously fake accent. In that sense, Miranda does justice to his predecessor in more ways than one.
If ever I lose my way, I just look up.
Number 7. Ellen's recasting. Most of the returning characters in this sequel are played by new actors, some more ironic than others. In Mary Poppins, actress Hermione Baddeley starred as the loyal Banks family maid.
The position has been filled.
Ellen is still employed at the Banks residence in the sequel, although now she's played by Julie Walters. What makes this casting choice especially amusing is that Walters once mentioned that she's often mistaken for other actresses, including Julie Andrews. Honestly, we can't blame him. Both are known for playing nurturing figures with magical abilities.
Where have you been? Harry, how wonderful to see you, dear.
This is also a reunion for Walters and co-star Ben Whishaw, who played Mrs. Bird and Paddington Bear in the highly acclaimed films. In case you needed a nudge to remember the connection, keep your ears open for marmalade references.
Thank you, Mrs. Bird.
I think every home should have a marmalade day.
And a bear.
Number 6. The Timeframe. It's no secret that Disney took a few liberties with the source material while adapting Mary Poppins to the big screen. The first Mary Poppins book was published in 1934, the same decade the story takes place. The 1964 film, meanwhile, sets itself in 1910, just a few years before World War I.
It's grand to be an Englishman in 1910. King Edward's on the throne. It's the age of men.
Weirdly enough, when you subtract 1910 from 1964, you get 54, which is exactly how many years it took Mary Poppins Returns to take flight. Instead of setting itself over 5 decades later, however, this sequel occurs about 20 years after the first film during the Great Depression. This places the film's events in the 1930s, finally catching up with Travers' books. Number 5. The Penguins Return.
Penguins have very much upset me, Mr. Disney. Animated dancing penguins.
Although P.L. Travers was reportedly upset about the first film's animated portion, it's hard to imagine Mary Poppins without that enchanting trip into Bert's drawings. One of the highlights from this segment found Bert dancing alongside 4 penguin waiters.
It's a jolly old day with Mary. No wonder that it's Mary that we love.
In Mary Poppins Returns, we're treated to another glorious sequence that merges live action with hand-drawn animation.
Come on, have a go.
No, I haven't sung in years.
Sing for us, Mary Poppins. Do sing for us.
No, I couldn't possibly.
When Mary and Jack perform A Cover Is Not the Book, some penguins sporting tuxedos are ready to accompany them. While their designs have been altered slightly, the penguins are every bit as scene-stealing as you remember them, making an already spellbinding scene even more supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
You'll find your first impression was mistook. For a cover is nice, but a cover is not the book.
Number 4. Mary's Wardrobe.
May I say you look lovely as always?
Do you really think so?
For Mary Poppins Returns, costume designer Sandy Powell reportedly made 448 original costumes from scratch. According to Powell, quote, "The only time I really alluded to the original was for Mary Poppins' arrival outfit."
You need to be more careful when the wind rises, George. You nearly lost your kite.
While the ensemble Mary first dons in the sequel possesses a more contemporary look, it certainly has echoes of her first appearance in the 1964 film. The most notable accessory is the bird on Mary's hat, which resembles the robin she shared a song with in the original.
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, the medicine go down, medicine go down.
Speaking of birds, the parrot head on Mary's umbrella also makes a comeback, and he still can't keep his beak shut. If anything, he's even chattier this time around.
That will be quite enough of that, thank you.
Number 3. The Kite.
I was flying the kite and I got caught on a nanny!
Rummaging through the attic, Jane and Michael stumble across a few nostalgic Easter eggs.
I honestly can't remember why we kept most of this stuff to begin with.
For starters, the snow globe Michael finds is exactly like the one Mary held during the Feed the Bird song.
Come feed the little birds, show them you care.
Keen eyes might also see the letter blocks from their nursery. Even more significant is their childhood kite, which Mr. Banks patched up at the end of the first film. Even after all these years, the kite is still held together with old papers, while Mrs. Banks's Votes for Women sash substitutes the tail.
Don't you remember that kite? We used to love flying that with Mother and Father.
The kite ends up being much more than a throwback, however, as it serves as a symbol of childhood. Once the kite takes flight again, Mary Poppins returns and brings the magic back into the Banks' lives.
Where did you get that kite?
I found it in the park. She kept it from blowing away.
Mary
Poppins.
Number 2. Can you imagine that?
I suspect, and I'm never incorrect, that you're far too old to give in to imagination.
While the original film had no shortage of timeless tunes, several songs were cut from the final product, including one number entitled The Beautiful Briny. Nevertheless, the Sherman Brothers would eventually work the song into Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which was something of a spiritual successor to Mary Poppins, even starring Mr. Banks himself. Mixing live action with animation, the song takes our protagonists under the sea where they encounter several colorful characters.
Bobbing along, singing a song on the bottom of the beautiful briny sea.
Mary Poppins Returns cleverly brings things full circle during the Can You Imagine That number, in which Mary turns bath time into an underwater adventure. Although it's not a recreation of the beautiful briny, you can definitely see its influence here, as Mary once again makes the impossible possible.
Some people like to splash and play. Can you imagine that?
Number 1. Cameos. Julie Andrews decided against appearing in Mary Poppins Returns as to not distract from Emily Blunt's performance, but the film is loaded with cameos nonetheless. In addition to playing Bert, Dick Van Dyke also appeared as Mr. Dawes Sr. in the 1964 film. Although Mr. Dawes laughed himself to death, Van Dyke returns here as his son, and his jumbled after-film credit is another nod to that appearance. The Balloon Lady is played by Angela Lansbury, who solidified her status as a Disney legend between her performances in Bedknobs and Broomsticks and Beauty and the Beast. Karen Dautrice, who played Jane in the original film, can also be spotted as a woman who asks for an address. Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from MsMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.